Well, good afternoon, folks. It's a good day. I'm telling you, it is a good day. I am Nicole Inica Hamilton, and I'm so pleased to be here with you and the AMANI Project. We have another wonderful conversation that's coming up today. Guess what? I get to spend this next hour or so with Dawn Wilkinson. Dawn, welcome to the AMANI Project. I'm so glad to be here with
Um,
you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here too. Looking
Yes,
forward to this.
yes, indeed. Well, my day just got a little sunnier. I'm just letting you know. And Dawn, I have to tell you, I've been watching you. Not to sound, all scary or anything, but I've been watching. I've been watching and following and reading. And Dawn, it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing to watch what you have been doing within community here and abroad. So congratulations to you. And thank
Thank
you.
you.
I feel the need to say thank you for
Oh
all that
wow.
you've done as well.
Oh, it's so kind of you. I really always just wanted to like tell stories, and the fact that I get to do that now every day and work with a lot of great people, and it's really I'm fulfilling the dream that I had many years ago. So it's like to be an artist and to make that my life.
Fulfilling the dream. That
Yeah.
resonates with me. It does, fulfilling the dream. And I feel like that's a great place to start. Coming back when you think about baby Dawn, little Dawn and
Oh
thinking
no.
about thinking about that dream. I remember being a little one and standing in front of the mirror and holding my hairbrush as if I was Diana Ross and thinking about that dream
Yeah.
of connecting with humans and being on stage. It was more than about being on stage, it was about connection.
Yeah.
When you look back at little Dawn, where did this all start for Dawn?
Well, it's funny because I'm not a performing artist, so I don't have that. I didn't have that. I did try to perform at times in my life, as a kid, as a dancer. I tried different things, but it was never um I never felt like being in the spotlight was in that way, expressing myself in that way was exactly the right. I think it's because I didn't know what directors did. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? I think if I had known as a kid what a director does, I would have known that's what I wanted to do. But I like to create plays. I like to write. I like to paint. I like to take pictures. Um, I like to act out stories with dolls. And I think about that and it just makes me laugh because it's like that's in a way what I do, like you create characters and blocking and figure out the best way to tell a story. So I didn't have the awareness of wanting to become a director or a filmmaker because I didn't, as a child, as much as I watched TV, as much as I watched movies, I didn't understand what the art form was. And in that sense, I didn't realize how people collaborated and how projects were made. If I'd known, I would have wanted to do it for sure. But I think when I look back, I like to do all the things that go into being a director. I would like, I mean, it's embarrassing. I would line up stuffed animals and I would create elaborate scenarios, but I didn't realize that that was where I was headed until much later. I was in my early 20s before I really understood what filmmaking was and what I wanted to be.
mm. So, in hearing that, I'm so curious to know then when you were a young one, what is it that you did envision yourself doing? I feel so I'm seeing the stuffed animals. I'm seeing them as you're
Yeah,
talking.
I still have
So
some of them. Trust me. Ship them to Los Angeles, like. No, it's like I would. I wanted to. I wanted to make something. I
Mm,
can't describe it. I in school I was always motivated to do well. I wanted to get good marks. I wanted to please to some extent. Um, and I but I knew that even as much as I like to think things through and as much as I liked abstract ideas, I knew that I wanted to make something. That was something that I knew. I didn't know how. I thought maybe I wanted to be maybe a fashion designer or I knew that like I tried painting and I liked painting, but I didn't feel I had the technical proficiency. I knew I wanted to make something. And that's all I can describe. That's the best way I can describe it. And I would enjoy getting lost in the process of making things. And that creativity, which is, I think, in some way kids do activities and can get into it and not really think of it as a career, but just as like an activity. That's really where it started. But I didn't. It was really when I made my first film, Dandelions, that I realized that I could achieve all of the things that I like to do in the making of a film project.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I remember years and years ago, someone told me as a child, do what you love
Hmm.
for your career. Do what you love. Do what makes you happy. What
Yeah.
brings you joy as an artist, Nicole. Do that and find ways to live out your career doing that. Are you doing what you love, Dawn?
I do think that's for young people that can be intimidating though, because sometimes you don't know what it is that you want to
Mm,
do, or you haven't fallen in love with the thing yet.
right.
And it takes, I think, a little bit of experimentation and giving yourself the time to explore and learn and um, see different artists at work to know that it is, you're finding the right discipline. Because for me, my Dandelions is like an experimental documentary, like a 5-minute personal documentary. And I did work in documentary for a while, but I did projects with the National Film Board. I did community-based video projects. I taught filmmaking. And and but there's so many parts to filmmaking. And when I got into the storytelling of, like, in fiction, and specifically with characters, and the emotional journey of characters in a fictional creating a fictional world, that was what really drew me, and where I felt like I was exactly in the right storytelling environment, and the exact right genre, essentially. And I think that everything I learned, like making music videos and public service announcements and teaching, and like, I did such a wide variety of projects within, like, the larger what is filmmaking. Like, it's quite a big thing, potentially. I think it takes time to, like, try the different aspects and realize where your skills are really, um, where what your skills are and where your interests are. And that was a process of over like, that took me a few years to realize that was, that fiction specifically was where I wanted to go.
And I feel like sometimes I love what you said about the taking time, because I think sometimes, as artists, as we grow and learn and create, we shift, we learn from others, that sometimes it can be kind of challenging at times to kind of learn and understand and know where we fit and what we're
Hmm.
supposed to be
That's
creating.
right. And, like, something like being a director, like, it involves a lot of different art forms. Like, often directors come from specific disciplines. Like, you'll get a director that was an editor or a production designer, or they were a writer, or they were an actor. So to become a director and have, like, sometimes people ask me, so, like, what did you do before you were a director? And I'm like, it's like, I've always been a director. But, like, that's not, it's only one way to become a director. So I think um, part of it is developing your interests and looking for opportunities to explore your interests, and then to learn from people who work in similar ways or have similar interests, and collaborate. And then you start to see, okay, here's my path. It's not like it's laid out. Like, when I look back, I go, oh, it looks like this was some plan, that I was in this direction and I knew what I was doing the entire time. And that's really not the case. It's just sort of like I just continued to go after trying to be in the situation. I mean, there was definitely a point where I was like, I want to work as a TV director, and I want that to exclusively be my job. But on a creative level, it didn't happen. So, like, it wasn't just simply a step by step. It was more me kind of like going in one direction, and then, like, one step forward, two steps back. Sometimes that's how it
Right,
was. Yeah.
right. And a lot of creatives are really kind of sitting back and thinking what life looks like for
Hmm.
us now, with all of what we've been encountering. Our global climate has shifted, Don. I mean,
Hmm.
it's shifted. It has
Yeah.
shifted, and some are even saying that it's exploded. And so within as we rest in that, how have you been doing as a creative, as an artist, as a director? How have you been actually doing over the course of the past couple of years as we have shifted? And what new thoughts might have come to you as a director and as you approach your creative approach, rather?
Yeah.
Any new thoughts and ideas that have come to you?
Well, I mean, I've been on set since August 2020, more or
Right.
less. So, um, the period prior to that, let's say, if we go back to the first shutdown, there was a period of time where where I had the opportunity to reflect, and I had time because things had been going very quickly for me career wise, and I hadn't really had time to think about what was happening. And then but I did start to realize, like I said to the writer of the episode I just directed on set, there's this noise on set between setups when people are setting the lights and moving equipment and directing each other within their departments, and it's just like this din of noise. And
Mm.
I said to her, listen. And you could hear people, like, it's not like there's loud talking, but there's talking and working and moving and equipment being shifted, and I'm like, I missed this sound. And she's like, are you
Uh-huh.
serious? I'm like, yes, I realized during that period of time that I missed this sound, and I truly love what I do. And so since August I've been working more or less constantly, and a change in a lot of the processes, between the testing and the space requirements and crowd work. Like, there's been a lot of changes. I've had to do more with visual effects. The pandemic has affected production in a number of different ways. Um, and it's changed some of the ways that the workflow happens, and it's required certain things to take more time. And I think, just in general, to think that it's a combination of, like, there's some concerns about how to do things safely, definitely, but also a great feeling of, like, why we all do the work that we do and why we're all there, and how important is to all of us to continue to do that work at the same time that, between the isolation, and it's almost like, no, it's not an essential service, filmmaking and entertainment, but it is important to people to have that entertainment to get through, difficult times, and to see characters go through situations. And I made a movie recently, and it's a comedy, and I think part of the reason I was drawn to comedy in this time was because I really wanted to feel good and to share,
Mm.
feelings of joy, um, and enlighten with ideas, but also empower, like, uplift, like, use my
Right.
art form to be in an uplifting tone. That's sort of where I felt, I wanted to put my time and energy, because, when times are serious, it's like you want to provide, like a look out a window at something different. So I think,
Mhm.
it's sort of brought back to me very clearly why I do the work that I do, what the tone and the feeling of the work I do, why I'm doing it, and also to have a greater appreciation and be grateful for the opportunity to even do the work. Who would have thought that there would be a time where there would be no production happening, and we've now
Mhm.
seen that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of people I think have also been considering, this word essential,
Hmm.
because I think a lot of times when we think about essential, especially now, we're thinking
Hmm.
about medical, we are thinking about
Yeah.
legal, we are thinking about food and water
Like life
supplies.
saving, yeah.
Right. Yeah, we
Mhm,
are. Yet there are many that I've heard say that art is essential.
mhm,
Film is essential because we need it. We need it to get through. I'm
yeah,
hearing that from many. We need it. We need it to sit back and allow it to fill us in so
yeah,
many different ways. What are your
yeah,
thoughts?
100%, and I mean, I feel, and I need to make it, or I start to feel crazy. No, like, absolutely, it's just, I guess it's a way of acknowledging, you know, that it's not life-saving in the conventional way, but
Mhm.
for our mental health, artistic expression. If you're a creative person, for your mental health, artistic expression is important. And I think honestly, it's something that in different formats everyone can benefit from. And then
Yes.
to, especially the kind of work that I'm interested in making, that's essentially entertaining, but that also has heart, and that gives the audience an opportunity to connect with real human emotion. I think this is absolutely an important part of our lives. Like I can't I see a world where we don't have stories to relate to reflect on who we are and where we're going and what's important to us, and to have joy in that, and to have um, that. I mean, to me, that's why I make films and television shows. And I think that it really, to me, it's like I grew up reading a lot of books. Like I was a kid that read and read and read and had like six books on the go at any given time. And you can definitely get a lot of the same experience from reading, in sense of like uh, going on a character's journey, almost like transporting you to another place in time. But the reality is, with the technology, like it's in this on screen, right? For a lot of people now, films and television are where they find that escape and entertainment. And by all means, I love books, and I'm not saying not to read books. I'm just saying that this is as important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite book? Do you have one that comes to mind, or author that comes to mind?
Oh, I mean, so many, but I think like Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye is a book
Mm.
that I read and had an impact on me. And I was lucky in university to have Norbesi Philip as a mentor, and she's a wonderful poet in person. So it's just, it's very broad, but certainly I responded specifically to the voice of Black female writers, because I saw myself reflected in their stories. And I think, as a filmmaker, and that was something I always wanted to do. Like, nothing, it didn't seem ground shaking, in a way, but to just like show something that you've experienced, that I've personally experienced, or that I understand intimately, to bring that to light. So
Mm. Yes,
yeah.
yeah. And I want to address something that I wasn't kidding when I said I have been watching you. That's
That's interesting,
that
because I hide out.
I've been watching Dawn. I've been taking notes, and you shared in an interview on Black Screen Office that your identity and exploring that was the reason why you were drawn to film as a visual medium, and I'd love to explore that. I'd love to explore that a little bit more. Your identity and exploring that reason. Has that been a big part of your why?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's like why would I get involved in telling a particular story? Like, why does the idea come? Or if it hasn't come from me originally, why do I want to pursue it? So, like, my first scripted film was Instant Dread, and it's a funny little magical reality about this hairdresser who creates an instant dreadlock hair potion. And the whole idea was that, like, she is visited by a spirit, and she gets this idea, and she creates this instant dreadlock hair potion that like unites people. And it was really around like dreadlocks and what does it mean, and is there a spiritual aspect. And I was inspired to tell that story because of how people responded to me, and I wanted to kind of acknowledge the like larger significance of the hairstyle without it being a documentary about black hair. So I feel like anything that I've experienced, like Dandelions, is about being black in Canada and having people ask me, "Where are you from?" over and over and over, and
Yes,
saying, "I'm from here," and them going, "No, where really?
yes,
where are you?
yeah.
Where are you really from?" Oh, So, devotion was about this, mixed race biracial girl growing up in a small town, and dealing with racism and losing her mom. So, like, that's not uh, literally an experience that I had, but it's sort of emotionally an experience that I understood and could convey. And even just recently, I directed. a movie, and it's about a young woman who's returning home. You know, she's gone off to pursue a career and be successful, and her grandmother has dementia, and she's, you know, wanting to find a way to put together this block party that her grandmother's done every year for the past 40 years. So it's like a comedy, but it also has this heartfelt feeling. And these are all experiences that I really understand intimately. And that's what I'm drawn to. And that's how I enter situations, even if it's a series, a television series. You know, I don't, the stuff that I end up doing, I usually can see in one of those characters or many of those characters, emotional situations I relate to. And that's how I figure out where to put the camera and how to move the camera and how to direct the actor. It all comes from a place of like me expressing a feeling and working with them to express the feelings of the script and put it together that way.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by the identity piece in this as well, because I think about conversations that I've had with Tanya Williams, who I know that you know, because I know your work has
Yeah.
also been presented at Real World Film Festival,
Oh,
and
yeah.
just really thinking about what it means to be a Black filmmaker in Canada, and also discussions around being a Black filmmaker in the US, and having conversations not only with Tanya but with others around the scope of what that looks like, and how others perceive filmmakers in Canada as well. And so, what has your experience been like? I'm so curious to know your experience been like in being someone who, as you mentioned in Black Screen Office, that your identity and exploring that was the reason why you were drawn to
Hmm.
film. How can you talk about how that has informed you and your presence as a Black filmmaker from Canada?
Well, I think, you know, I've had, my glass is half full. So I have the way of looking at it that like I had the benefit of uh, a great supportive artistic community. You know, my first several projects were supported by the Ontario Arts Council, by the Canada Council for the Arts. The Canada Council for the Arts gave me my first grant for my film Instant Dread, and I believe that my even my first short film Dandelions got support. So, and the Ontario Arts Council supported my feature Devotion. So I feel like I had both the artistic community support, and I also had the opportunity to work in production in Toronto, which is like a big production center in North America. So Norman Jewison made a movie called The Hurricane in Toronto. I had the chance to be his assistant. That gave me a window into like what happens on a real set. It helped me see what a director really does, and made me have the idea that I could actually do that creatively. Um, and I was also like an assistant to Ernest Dickerson, who is a very talented director and director of photography. And so seeing these two very different artists at work and letting my own imagination kind of go there. And that was like, even that was like a combination of like the Canadian system and sort of like some, I mean, I think Ernest's movie was a Showtime movie at the time. So, and Norman's movie was, you know, a Hollywood movie. So there's always been in Toronto, which is like when I talk about Canada, I'm really talking about Toronto. And after I became a TV director and worked in different cities in Canada, I realized I really how vast and different all of the parts of Canada are, right? So, but
Right.
Toronto people tend to generalize like Toronto is Canada. So I'm guilty of that. Um, but you know, and then coming to and I started to come to the US when I was basically looking to broaden my opportunity as a director in Toronto, because when you're looking at the lists of the Directors Guild of Canada and you see what's shooting in Toronto, and 90% of the directors, I'm exaggerating, not, you know, 80, 70, I don't know, a large percentage of the directors are coming in from the US, and you're like, okay, how can I get on those shows? So that's really where the move to the US came from my perspective. It was much more trying to broaden the opportunities, you know, because on the one hand, I had, you know, it wasn't like overnight. It took many years of sort of persistence, and because as I had said earlier, you know, I came out of the Canadian Film Center, and it was like I'm a director, and people looked at me like, no, really, what are you going to do? Like maybe produce or write. And I'm like, yes, I'm interested in those things, but directing is specifically what I want to focus on. And I just didn't fit the mold of what the perception at that time was of who a director is in terms of the person that's going to lead the set and be in charge and be the boss. Like,
White and male.
mm, or at least not black and female and young.
Right.
That just did not compute at that
Right.
time. And things have changed, like to the point, things have changed in the perception of what's possible. I'm not saying that things have changed and it's become like super easy and the statistics have changed and we're equally represented or anything like that. But there's definitely been a change in perception about what is possible. And, and I'm grateful for that. And I think, the thing about like, it's interesting to work in a place like Atlanta where it's so the black culture is fairly dominant, compared to what you would see like on a set in Canada still. Like we have a lot of diversity on sets in Canada, but it's different. When you go to Atlanta, it's like, okay, this is like it feels like a really black environment. And it's an interesting feeling and it's a nice feeling of inclusion. But then I'm Canadian. So so to get back to your identity question, it's like, but always felt like um and I think part of my vision as an artist is partially like an understanding of like I fit in, but I don't fit in, or I know how it
Mm.
is to, I belong and I don't belong. I want to belong and I still, there's a 1 foot in, 1 foot, I'm in two different worlds a lot of the time. And that's pretty much my identity. So like at this point, I'm not saying it's like aspire to this. I'm just saying I'm comfortable being inside and outside of any given situation. And I look at it as a strength.
Mm. Yeah. I'm so intrigued by the fitting in, the not fitting in, because I do hear that often from individuals who have worked in both arenas, so to speak, who've worked in the US, who've worked in Canada, but individuals who also have identify in many different ways or in multiple ways in
Hmm.
and wondering, okay, well, yeah, where do I fit in? Do you feel like, Don, that is an ongoing experience for you, or was that something that was happening more so throughout the beginning parts of your journey? The question about fitting in and not fitting in.
Yeah, I mean, I think uh, it's look, creatively it still drives me, right? So like if
Mm,
someone pitches me a movie and it's about a character who doesn't fit in, I'm going to respond to that. Like emotionally and creatively, that's still where I'm at in terms of my artistic expression. But I think on a daily basis, I'm at that point where I feel fairly comfortable in my craft. And the fun thing about film production or television production is in any given city where it happens, we have some cultural similarities. You know what I'm saying? Like it's its own world in itself. We have our own language, we have our own structure, and so it's I'm not to say that cities aren't unique and the character of the local community doesn't have a role, but I'm saying basically drop me on a film set anywhere and I feel like I'm at home. And I'm not kidding, you know? So, like, that's the nice part about it. Like, I've done this now for so long and I understand it so well that when I'm in a production environment or a creative environment that's related to production, I'm quite comfortable with like what's going on. I can understand it. It's like I immediately know where I have my bearings. I know where I am. And there's not a feeling of like, how to negotiate it in that way. Like I know where I am, and then that's where I'm truly most at home. So, but thematically, the questions around belonging are still very dear to me, and I am aware that like because it's not. I mean, even in spite of all the perception shift that I've spoken about, there have been times where I've been the first woman, the
mm,
first black woman, the first, on that particular show or for that particular producer or with that cast member. Like there's no doubt that I've many firsts many times,
right.
and there has been, it's true, a constant requirement to prove oneself over and over and over and
Mm,
over and over. And yeah, it's nice now sometimes when I get to go back into an environment where I've already done it to a point and they know me, and I haven't that okay, here we go again. I'm going to prove myself again. But it became very much a feature of part of what I was just, again, what with the job for me. Like, I have to go in, I have to prove myself, I have to go in, I have to prove
Mm,
myself. Like it was almost like that was part of the job there, for me, because it never wasn't there until it stopped being there as much recently, like in the last couple of years.
right.
Um, so even that is maybe, I was different degrees of aware of it depending on like the personalities I was dealing with. Because sometimes you're made to feel welcome, and other times you're made to feel like you not that you shouldn't be grateful, but that somehow you're lucky to be there. And so it depends on how you're treated, how that need to prove oneself is experienced, whether it feels good or if it feels difficult. Um, but now, I mean, it's partially the benefit of age and time that you start to care less on a certain level how you're being
Yeah.
perceived, and you just go in and do your job. So I'm sure that being a first for people in some cases has made that need to prove myself more, and it kind of just went with the territory. And I tried to not take it personally. I tried to I just put it in the category of like, I still have to do what I have to do, and if they'll get used to it, kind of thing.
Right. Ooh, the
Hmm.
taking it personally part, Don. Ooh. Can we talk about that for a moment, please? Because, I recently had some great conversations with artists who have, really thought about what does it mean to create art, to put art out there, but then have it critiqued in a way that doesn't make us feel good, being critiqued and being comfortable with whatever that critique is. So how do you face that when you put work out there and it's great? Um, how do you face critics? I think this is a question I think that a lot of emerging artists would love to hear your thoughts on. What do we do when we put art out there and the response is not what we've expected? How do you deal with that? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, in this way, film is so specific and television is so specific, and I know from my own experience that the more personal the work is, the more personally it's hard not to take it personally. Like, if it's like some of the work that I've done has been more, it's a television show that has its own storyline, its own structure. I'm given an episode, I'm doing what it's scripted in that episode, I'm putting my stamp on it, but I'm not creating it out of all my life's experience, right? So in a way that's a little bit easier on that aspect of it because it's not as personal, but even then, even then you can feel personally about people's reaction to your work. And there's so many aspects to it. First of all, there's the environment in which it's promoted, right? So like
Mm,
either it's seen by the right people or it's not, and that is really, the artist has a there's a limit. I'm not saying that the artist can't play a role in getting their work to the right audience, but let's be realistic. It's a separate art. It's a different art than actually making the art. like you
right.
know, so you have to put that in the context and maybe think about how you're getting your artwork out into the world. If because to get the right result in terms of response, it first of all has to reach the right people. Um, because another aspect of that is personal taste, right? I like it, I don't like it. Is that the work or is that what I think, my opinion? And it's art. So ideally, not everyone's going to have the same expression or response to it. One of the things I like most about, not most, I like a lot about filmmaking is that you can make something and people will respond to it differently, right? That's the whole point. It's a communication, respond to it. But if you don't like it, maybe you don't like what I have to say. Maybe you don't appreciate my point of view. Maybe you have a different experience than I have. Maybe aesthetically, this isn't visually the kind of thing you like, and that's subjective. So I can't make something that everybody in the world's going to like, and otherwise it's entirely generic, and then it's not me anymore. So I think you have to take enough satisfaction in the process of making it. This is really what it is. It's about your process as an artist and the joy being in the making, not in the exhibition. Like
Oh,
the
yes.
exhibition, the exhibition is important to make a career as an artist. I'm not denying that, But there's lots of factors about the exhibition that are going to be determined by things that have nothing to do with what you've got going on as an artist. So you can't take that part personally, or you have to find a system which will support your work. But as for like personally, like I think about when I don't like something, and sometimes when I don't like something, it's because I wanted it to be something else. I wanted to see a different character's perspective. I want it to be a different color. I want to see a different shape. It's not that I don't like you. I just had in my mind something I would have liked better. And that's often when I see a movie or whatever, and that gets back to like the inspiration and the storytelling. It's like, oh, I would have liked to see that story from the woman's perspective, or I would have liked to see this story from the black character's perspective, or that's a very simplistic way of putting it. But sometimes you just are not getting the criticism is based on what the own critic's perceptions and life experience and
Yes.
a desire are, right? And you can't, but art will allow you, in some cases, you can show people something that they hadn't thought of, that they didn't see, that they maybe didn't even want to see, right? And that's where the power of it lies. Like you can actually create a world and you can show something to people that they've never seen before. And that's, what I find inspiring. So like it's hard, especially like you write applications. I mean, I would tell you how many things I've applied for and not gotten if I knew what the number was, but it's too high. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's too high. The number of
Right.
scripts I've written that haven't been produced, the number of awards I didn't get, the number of film festivals I didn't get into, like the list is very, very long. And I still have a successful career. So it's almost like it goes with the territory. When you're a creative person, you're putting stuff out and you're trying to get stuff made. There has to be no, there has to be rejection, and you cannot let it paralyze you, because then you won't make work. And so, if the priority is to make work and to take joy in the making of it, that you just have to sustain yourself enough for that. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to get, and it's easier said than done. How do you sustain yourself? How do you make money? How do you continue to make work when you feel like it's going nowhere, or it's taking too long to complete, or you can't find the audience, or there's lots of obstacles. I totally get it. I've experienced a lot of them myself, but it's about finding a way to get through that and to keep making stuff, so that you keep making stuff, because that's how you get better at making stuff. That's how you find an audience. That's how you gather the resources and the momentum to keep going, and that's how you get better. So it's really like a lot of it is a mental exercise
Yes.
in tenacity.
Yes. Oh, Don, let me tell you, that's brilliant. And I think it's so important for us to, as artists, to really think about what you've just said, because when we are so focused on the critique, sometimes we can forget the why and enjoy the process of creating art, because we're so concerned with what the response has been. And so that subjective response that you're talking about, you're very right. When I think about two times when I've not enjoyed a film, for example, it has nothing to do with the director or nothing to do with the actors. A lot of times within that film, sometimes it just simply has to do with my lived experience, that I
Right.
can't relate to what is
Hmm.
happening in that film. And so I love what
Hmm.
you're sharing, because I think that's so important for individuals who emerging, and whether you're emerging or not, to really think about the why and the enjoyment, and to not lose that among
Hmm.
the storm potentially of someone not enjoying a film. Because a lot of
Hmm.
times there's thousands of others who have enjoyed it. But
Yeah.
sometimes we focus on that one,
Well, yeah, of
that
course. It's
one.
it's the one person. And I think
Right.
particularly if you are, and then if your project is to change, not, it sounds idealistic and naive, but like to change the world, right? To bring a
Mm,
new perspective, to articulate something that hasn't been said a million times.
right.
If your endeavor is something original in any way, then of course it's going to be harder for people to get it initially, potentially. Maybe not when it's fully realized, but specifically as an idea, it's going to be harder to sell, because people are going to be like, I don't know what this is. Like
Mm,
it's so you can't. Especially when your project is something that's really highly creative or original or a new voice, then there's going to be some difficulty in getting
mm,
there. And that's part of why it's important to do it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, Dawn, I know that I'm going to be letting you go very soon, but can we please talk about your incredible list of directorial credits? Many are my faves.
You want me
You
to make a
you've got
list?
you got a fan club out here. I've got to tell you, you've got a fan club. I mean, from Kim's Convenience, Riverdale, Murdoch Mysteries, Degrassi, The Good Doctor, also one of my favorites. When you think when you look at this incredible list, the wonderful work that you have done, do you have any standouts? I'm almost afraid to ask you that because, I mean, if I were in your position, I'd be given the whole list as my standouts. But,
Well, I
but
mean, it's true. I mean, it's it's wonderful when you get to go back to a show and you've done multiple episodes, but I will say, in the last 2 years, I did get the chance to direct Octavia Spencer and Truth Be Told, which is
yeah,
a series for Apple. And I got to also direct Viola Davis and How to Get Away with Murder. And How to Get Away with Murder was a show I'd been watching. It's similar to Empire. Both of those shows I watched from the very beginning. And at the beginning of those shows, there was no like I would be like, let's just put it this way: directing an episode of that show wasn't even on my list of things to do when season one started because I didn't have any idea how that could happen. You
right.
know what I mean? Like I wasn't like I'm gonna watch Empire, I'm gonna direct it because I'm gonna get to direct in season four, season five, or I didn't. I was just watching the shows as a fan. So to come to those sets and be faced with the reality that I would be directing those episodes was like it was exciting, and to work with actors who are so because partially what a director is doing is and it's obvious, but like you're communicating with actors about the scene, right, and figuring out what's the best behavior, body language, camera placement, and you work it out with the actors, and actors with a lot of experience who have really honed their craft in a way make the director's job harder because they ask you questions about like why you want them to do certain things or they want
Ah,
or what lines mean and why they're important or not important and what the body language should be according to those things, and so I just find it so I just learn a lot, and it's so fascinating to work with really accomplished actors because same with on Empire, like they just, and even a show that has been that's the nice thing about for me to go onto a show that's maybe season two or season three onwards, that they've worked out certain aspects to the way the show needs to be made, and then you can really just zero in and focus on the creative aspects of your particular episode. When you do like the season one or the season, sometimes season two, you're still like working with the show to really zero in on what works on that show. But so anyway, all that to say, you know going to the set of a show where you've been a fan and you've watched the actors and you've watched the stories, and to stand in that set, like there's this moment of going like, wow, like this is cool.
yeah. Well, I would imagine, and I'm so mindful of the many individuals that are going to be listening to your shares today and what has inspired you, your walk, your journey. And I must ask you before you do leave us today, for those individuals that are curious and want to know words of wisdom from Dawn, what are your thoughts for aspiring artists, educators, directors, filmmakers, as it relates to the above, what we've spoken about today? What would you leave them with?
I mean, the I think what's really important is to give yourself permission to create and not to put pressure on yourself to achieve milestones, that you think you need to have X, Y, or Z accomplished by a certain time. And I'm not saying don't make a plan. Plans are great, lists are great. But the most important thing is to find a way of continuing to, you know, ins- not inspire yourself, but to continue to work on your craft or experiment in your art form or keep coming up with ideas, keep a journal, allow yourself to be creative without putting the pressure of the final product on yourself all the time because the final product will emerge if you can stay in touch with yourself creatively and your creative voice. Like that's where your individuality is and that's what you want to nurture. And just because other people don't necessarily share your point of view, that's no reason to think that you need to change because you don't. You just need to continue to hone your craft and
Mm.
develop your voice.
Oh, that's a word right there. I'm just taking that in. I am because there are so many brilliant innovators that had certain thoughts and ideas that became renowned. And so a lot of times if we are sitting within our own creative thoughts and thinking, "Oh my goodness, is this right? Is this okay? Is this um is this going to be accepted? Is this going to be real?" And
Yeah.
sometimes I've heard artists say that they've scrapped it because it just seems too far out there. And so I love your share. It's just about being authentic
Hmm.
and allowing ourselves to create in the way that we know best, what seems real to us, what's organic to who we are.
That's it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Don, let me tell you, you are delightful. You are lovely. It has been such a pleasure to sit down with you today and to learn from you. I'm so grateful for your shares today. I want to thank you so much for what you are doing in film, in television, and so much more. Thank you for being someone that that has been such a great inspiration. Really appreciate you joining me here today on the
Thank
Amani
you.
Project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Don Wilkinson, folks. I mean, come on. It's been such a pleasure to sit down with Dawn today. I want to thank her again for joining me and for giving such beautiful, brilliant, kind shares with regards to her journey. So stay with us. We have so much more coming up on the Amani Project. Want to thank, of course, all who are going to be watching today, all of you for joining us in future. So that's it for the Amani Project today. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton. Look forward to seeing you again very soon.